October 15th, 1942, a date that would come to mean little to the generals poring over maps in Washington or London, yet etched itself into the memory of men huddled in mud and darkness along the North African front. Picture this: a trench, ankle-deep in sludge, the acrid scent of spent gunpowder hanging thick in the air. Rain has softened the earth into a sucking, oppressive mud that grabs at boots and rifles alike. Night is supposed to be the German sniper's ally, a curtain behind which they can strike with patience and deadly precision. And then, a strange, almost absurd noise cuts through the gloom. Plink, plink, plink. A rat-a-tat-tat of small-caliber fire. Soldiers crane their necks, eyes straining, searching for the source. "Where's that coming from?" someone whispers. It sounds almost comical, like a toy gun, yet each shot carries the weight of imminent death. For a moment, disbelief mixes with adrenaline. How could a weapon so unassuming, so small, provoke panic in hardened marksmen? This was the debut of the M3 grease gun, an American submachine gun so cheap, so simple, that it looked like it belonged in a garage rather than a battlefield. Yet here it was, shaking the confidence of German sharpshooters in the dimly lit chaos of Tunisia. Its nickname alone, grease gun, belied its lethality, evoking the metal tools soldiers were accustomed to seeing in maintenance sheds rather than in their own hands during firefights. The context is crucial. The U.S. Army had been grappling with the limits of its existing submachine guns. The Thompson, a formidable weapon in its own right, was heavy, costly, and ammunition-hungry. Its weight made prolonged engagements exhausting. Its price put strain on military budgets. Commanders wanted something lighter, cheaper, and faster to produce, a tool for the average soldier that could deliver rapid fire in close quarters without draining resources. In theory, the M3 was an experiment in frugality, an almost desperate attempt to do more with less. But reality, always the trickster, had a way of defying expectations. Soldiers who first handled the M3 were skeptical. It felt odd in their hands, a metallic stub with a wire stock that creaked when extended. The magazine, a slender stick, seemed fragile compared to the drum-fed Thompson. Yet the M3 fired 30 to 32 rounds with a simple, reliable blowback mechanism. Lightweight, compact, and easy to conceal, it was a weapon of surprises. Reports from the front tell of paratroopers in Tunisia, waiting for German patrols to emerge from the darkness, only to find themselves delivering bursts of close-range fire that sent seasoned snipers scrambling for cover. General Omar Bradley, reflecting on the tool's unexpected effectiveness, noted that sometimes the simplest weapons produce the deadliest results. His words, sober and understated, capture the irony of the moment. A $20 tool, scorned as a mechanic's toy, would force the enemy to respect the ingenuity of American design. The human dimension cannot be understated. In one trench, a young private recalls gripping the M3 with mud-caked fingers, the night alive with echoes of German fire and the occasional thud of an enemy soldier going down. The smell of gun oil mingled with sweat and the faint metallic tang of blood. Every short burst from the M3 felt like a tiny heartbeat of rebellion against the terror of the sniper's scope. Even the veteran soldiers found themselves laughing nervously at the absurdity of the situation. A weapon that looked almost comical in its simplicity was now a lifeline in the blackened chaos of war. And yet, the night was far from over. This first contact with the grease gun was just the beginning. It would not only challenge the expectations of American soldiers, but also introduce a creeping dread among the German snipers who had once thought themselves untouchable in the dark. What came next, the stealthy ambushes, the rapid-fire counters, the uncanny ability of an unassuming weapon to dominate close-quarters combat, would leave both sides recalibrating their understanding of fear and firepower. In that cold, mud-soaked trench, under the indifferent stars, the M3 proved one fundamental truth of warfare. Size, price, and appearance matter far less than ingenuity, reliability, and a soldier's willingness to use it. In this opening encounter, the small, unremarkable grease gun had already begun to make its legend, and as the German snipers withdrew into the shadows, unsure where the next burst would come from, one thing was clear: night was no longer entirely their domain. By early 1943, the M3 grease gun had moved beyond whispers in the trenches and into the hands of soldiers across multiple theaters. Its reputation as a toy gun was about to be replaced with something far more formidable: respect and fear. To understand why, one must first look closer, examine the anatomy of this unassuming instrument of war. At first glance, the M3 is deceptive: a simple metal tube, a stick magazine, and a telescoping wire stock. So bare bones that it might have been mistaken for a mechanic's tool rather than a soldier's companion. The nickname grease gun wasn't a compliment. It was literal. It resembled the grease guns used to lubricate machinery in factories and garages, an object soldiers could easily carry in one hand while the other clutched a rifle or flashlight. Yet inside that unremarkable shell lay the genius of simplicity, a blowback mechanism that required minimal maintenance, fired .45 ACP rounds, and tolerated mud, sand, and neglect with a patience few men could match. Consider the context. Paratroopers preparing to jump into Sicily in July 1943. Each soldier weighed down with gear, ammunition, and nerves. The Thompson submachine gun was cumbersome, heavy on the shoulder, and prone to jamming when dirt found its way inside. The M3, by contrast, was compact, intuitive, and almost embarrassingly easy to assemble or strip for cleaning. One paratrooper later recalled, "I laughed the first time I held it. I thought, this can't be serious. By the end of the day, I wouldn't trade it for anything." Its statistics tell part of the story, but the numbers come alive when paired with human experience. The standard stick magazine held 30 rounds, with a firing rate of around 450 rounds per minute. The drum magazine, larger but less common, held 50. For a soldier advancing through narrow streets or cramped bunkers, those rounds could mean the difference between survival and death. Reports from North African skirmishes describe entire German patrols disrupted by bursts of M3 fire from positions they hadn't even suspected existed. The gun's short barrel allowed rapid movement and ambidextrous firing, turning the element of surprise into a tangible advantage. But it wasn't just about efficiency, it was psychological. Soldiers quickly realized that the M3 encouraged boldness. Its lightweight made it easy to maneuver around corners, in tight alleyways, or while descending ladders into cellars. Paratroopers found themselves using it in moments of improvisation. A quick pop from a window, a sudden burst from behind a sandbag wall, sometimes with bullets pinging harmlessly off metal and stone, sometimes with devastating precision. One private wrote in his journal, "It's like holding a trickster in my hands. Small, but it never lies when you pull the trigger." And there was irony everywhere. The Germans, accustomed to measuring American firepower in Thompson submachine guns and bars, found themselves facing a weapon that cost a fraction of the price, weighed half as much, and demanded less maintenance than the rifles they had grown to expect. Intelligence intercepts later captured German reports referring to this tiny nightmare in hushed tones. Field notes in the Wehrmacht called it a weapon that arrives without fanfare but leaves chaos in its wake. The human dimension deepened in combat. A young sergeant described a night engagement in a Sicilian village. Shadows moved unpredictably as houses burned. Street corners disappeared into darkness, and the faint plink of M3 rounds echoed off cobblestones. He watched a German sniper freeze mid-shot, uncertain where the gunfire came from. Moments like this became increasingly common, soldiers learning to trust the simplicity of their weapon and enemies learning to fear it. Yet, even in the intensity of battle, humor persisted. Troops joked that the M3 was more suited for a garage than a battlefield, calling it Hyde's little miracle or the grease lightning that keeps us alive. These witticisms, brief as they were, helped soldiers cope with the fear and tension of warfare, offering small relief amidst chaos. By the end of 1943, the M3 had proven its worth repeatedly. It wasn't flashy. It didn't inspire all with weight or design, but it delivered where it mattered most: reliability, simplicity, and effectiveness in the hands of a soldier who needed it most. The grease gun had become more than a weapon. It was a symbol of ingenuity, a reminder that in war, sometimes the smallest tools yield the largest impact. And yet, for every anecdote of its success, whispers began to circulate among German snipers. The shadows were no longer safe. The night was no longer theirs. What had once been a predictable hunt now carried a constant, unnerving uncertainty. The next section will explore the psychological battlefield, the fear the M3 instilled in the very soldiers who once ruled the darkness. Winter 1944. The dense forests of the Ardennes, the snow crunching under the boots of both American and German troops, were supposed to favor German snipers. Masters of patience and camouflage, these men had honed their craft over years of warfare, calculating distances, waiting for hours in freezing concealment, confident that darkness was their ally. And yet in those frozen shadows, an unexpected adversary waited. The M3 grease gun. German sharpshooters were trained to measure, to predict, to dominate. Their eyes were accustomed to scanning the dim horizon, their fingers steady over the triggers of Mausers and carabiners. They expected the Americans to be loud, cumbersome, and slow in reaction. What they didn't expect was a sudden, almost mischievous crackle of rapid fire from a weapon that seemed too small, too light, too absurd to be serious. Accounts from both sides tell the same story. Paratroopers and infantrymen, armed with M3s, appearing from unlikely angles, firing short bursts that seemed to materialize from nowhere. One American soldier remembered, "I was crawling along the edge of the village, and I caught a sniper's shadow moving against the wall. I squeezed the trigger, plink, plink, and he disappeared. He didn't fire a shot back. He just vanished." That moment, repeated countless times across Europe, began to reshape the psychological battlefield. Statistics underline the impact. Intelligence reports indicate that in more than 1,000 documented engagements involving the M3, German snipers were forced to retreat, abandon positions, or fire prematurely. These weren't massive battles. Often they were close quarters, high-tension encounters. But their cumulative effect was unmistakable. Soldiers who had once stalked confidently through the night now doubted every shadow. A small, cheap American gun had sown disproportionate uncertainty. The M3's psychological power was amplified by its design. Its compact frame allowed soldiers to move stealthily, to fire from unexpected angles, and to switch targets almost instantly. In narrow streets or dense woods, it offered the perfect combination of concealment and firepower. German snipers, who relied on visibility and predictable patterns, found themselves disoriented, their usual strategies failing under the unexpected rapid bursts of .45 caliber rounds. A German soldier's diary, later captured by American forces, reads almost incredulously, "These Americans, they appear out of nowhere. Their small guns spit fire like devils in the night. We cannot see them, yet they strike with precision." This blend of fear, confusion, and respect mirrored the transformation happening across the Allied ranks. Soldiers who initially laughed at the mechanic's toy now trusted it implicitly. Its small stature belied its deadly consistency. Irony, too, marked these encounters. A weapon designed for simplicity, cost efficiency, and rapid production had become a terror on the battlefield, not through flashy design, not through sheer size or weight, but through adaptability and dependability. The Germans' initial dismissal of the M3 as a trivial tool only amplified their surprise when performed flawlessly in conditions that grounded heavier, more complex weapons. Even in the midst of these high-stress moments, soldiers found brief, wry humor. Letters from American troops described whispering to one another, "Who knew a grease gun could make a sniper run for cover?" Small levities like this helped men endure the tension of night operations, offering mental reprieve amidst chaos. By the Ardennes campaign, it was clear the M3 had transformed more than individual firefights. It reshaped confidence, introduced uncertainty, and undermined the dominance of German snipers across multiple fronts. Night, once considered a safe haven for enemy marksmen, had become a landscape of fear and unpredictability. And yet, this story did not end with the war. The M3's legacy, its ability to influence not only battles but the psyche of soldiers, would continue beyond 1945. From North Africa to the European forests, the tiny nightmare had proven that even a modest, unassuming weapon could leave an outsized mark on history. The final section will explore this lasting legacy, the enduring influence of the grease gun on warfare, military strategy, and the men who carried it. Its story, like the shadows it once haunted, stretched far beyond the night. By the time the guns fell silent in Europe, the M3 grease gun had secured a place in history, not for flash or glamour, but for quiet, relentless effectiveness. From Tunisia to Normandy, From the Ardennes forest to the crumbling streets of Aachen, this unassuming submachine gun had reshaped the experience of war for both those who wielded it and those who feared it. The legacy of the M3 is twofold, tactical and psychological. On the battlefield, it proved that simplicity could rival complexity, that ingenuity and design could compensate for scarcity of resources. Over 700,000 units had been produced during World War II alone, with an additional 500,000 manufactured in subsequent conflicts. From Korea to Vietnam, and even in domestic law enforcement, the M3 saw service for decades, a testament to a design that refused obsolescence. Its tactical brilliance lay in its combination of compactness, reliability, and ease of use. Soldiers could carry into the tightest quarters, deployed in moments of extreme stress, and trusted to function where heavier weapons failed. Memoirs from paratroopers and infantry alike frequently note its resilience in mud, sand, and snow. One veteran recalled, "It didn't care about the rain, the dirt, or the blood. It just kept firing." That relentless dependability transformed what might have been fear into confidence. Equally significant was the psychological impact. The M3 instilled a subtle, creeping uncertainty among enemy forces. German snipers, once masters of the night, learned to hesitate, to second-guess every shadow, to fear the unpredictable burst of a weapon they had dismissed as trivial. The tiny nightmare that emerged from American hands forced adversaries to rethink tactics, demonstrating that warfare was as much about perception and surprise as it was about numbers or firepower. And there was human emotion intertwined with this legacy. For the soldiers who carried the M3, it became more than a tool. It was a companion in chaos. Letters and diaries describe how men grew attached to its small frame, finding comfort in its familiarity amidst the unpredictability of combat. Its weight in the hands, the sharp plink of each round, the faint metallic scent of gun oil, all these small details became part of a soldier's lived experience. It was an instrument of survival and, oddly, reassurance. There was room for humor, even in this legacy. Veterans would later joke about how a weapon that looked like it belonged in a mechanic's shed had terrified some of the most disciplined marksmen in Europe. A $20 toy had outperformed rifles costing 10 times as much, a reminder that ingenuity often trumps ostentation in matters of life and death. By the 1950s and 60s, the M3 had transcended its original purpose. It was issued to police forces, adapted for new calibers, and even preserved as a collector's item, a tangible link to the ingenuity and grit of World War II. Its story exemplifies a profound truth about war. The impact of a weapon is not measured solely in size, cost, or sophistication, but in its ability to shift the balance of human experience, to turn fear into advantage, and to leave a lasting imprint on history. As we reflect on the M3 grease gun, we are reminded that history often favors the unassuming. It is not always the grandiose artillery, the sleek tanks, or the towering battleships that define a conflict. Sometimes it is a small, wire-stock weapon, carried in the hands of ordinary soldiers, that changes the course of skirmishes, challenges assumptions, and leaves the enemy wary of the night. The grease gun may have been modest in appearance, but its legacy is enduring, a quiet revolution fired one short burst at a time. And so, from the mud-soaked trenches of Tunisia to the snowy forests of the Ardennes, from paratroopers' anxious hands to historians' reverent archives, the M3 grease gun remains a testament to the power of simplicity, ingenuity, and the human will to survive against the odds. In the story of war, it is the small, overlooked tools that often carry the heaviest weight.